Breathe. Just breathe. Reach out with your feelings. What do you see?
The island. Life. Death and decay that feeds new life. Warmth.
Do you expect me to talk?
Hello and welcome to episode 116 of Do You Expect Us to Talk? I'm your host Becca and as always joined by the illustrious Dave, Chris and special extra special guest Charlie Brigden. How are you doing, chaps?
Good evening, folks.
Hello.
Hi, I'm on hold. I'm waiting for Do You Expect Us to Talk?
Hello, General Fox.
Yeah, it's a podcast where we talk about films and say smutty humour. Okay,
sorry, I'm not hearing anything. Sorry.
Can you hear us?
No, it's okay. I'll wait.
Hello, folks. Sorry, it's Chris.
Yeah, we'd figured that out.
Think, fucking hell, there's Oscar Isaac's here or something. Yeah.
You can confirm that was Chris.
Was even more surprised. I thought it might be Aid Edmondson.
Right, once again, we've got everyone in
he's
England
tooling
recording.
with you, sir.
Hey, I listened to the commentary, and he said the reason he cast Adrian Edmondson was he was a big fan of Bottom.
Good.
Ryan Johnson is a big fan of Bottom.
It's just a shame that Hooks couldn't find his inner Rik Mayall and could have had also
What do we do when we
scene on
capture
you.
them? We're going to do it to them. Yes.
Richie, bastard! Hits him with a frying pan.
I do wonder if he would have tried to find a role for both of them. Not necessarily
Probably.
together. That would have been too distracting.
That would have been amazing. If you could have come back as Rik Mayall as a Jedi Master or something, that would have been amazing.
Well, actually, Rik Mayall would have played a really good Hooks, thinking about it.
You would have done, actually. That's good. Yeah, good idea. Or I think, if they're able to Uncanny Valley and animate Tarkin with another actor, then surely they could have done something.
Surely they can get Rik Mayall borrowing some chest hair onto himself.
Or borrow another actor and put his face on, I don't know what you call it, motion capture, and do it that way and kind of animate the likeness of Rik Mayall into this film somehow, just so you've got Richie and Eddie.
Yeah.
Anyways, if you haven't guessed, listeners, we are about to review Star Wars: The Last Jedi, starring Daisy Ridley, John Boyega, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, Oscar Isaac, Adam Driver, Lupita Nyong'o, and many, many more. Written and directed by Ryan Johnson and released in 2017. I'm not going to go into the whole cast because it is very long.
No, that's fine. So,
Please go to IMDb.com for details.
So, guys, what do we make of The Last Jedi after all this time?
After all this time, yeah, we've got everyone in England recording this again tonight as well, because we got to this as another one we recorded nearly all of. We kept promising to redo it and kept trying to redo it, and stuff happened. So here we are with it a couple of months out on home release now.
Life got in the way.
I don't think life got in the way. Our schedule got in the way. We had to move on at some point.
We did.
And obviously we then needed to get to... and there's no point doing it in February when you've got a Star Wars film coming out in May, so it was always going to get driven by Solo's release. That was late May, and we had to get into a position of finishing our previous series, so that's why it's taken us into June to redo it. I'll quickly go first. This is a film that I like much more in concept and ambition than execution. For all the whinging you see out there about it, I'm really glad this film exists. I think it's what it does is sort of slightly rewrite the language of Star Wars in its references are from very different places. We'll discuss an episode of the rebooted Battlestar Galactica as we go along that this takes an awful lot from. It feels unlike any other Star Wars film. It's still kind of funny for a film that people talk about as dark. I think I laughed more at this film than any of the others. It unencumbers itself of its past. Right from getting rid of sort of they didn't. We'll talk about what happens with the sort of Jedi texts and everything as we go along. But it frees up the Star Wars universe to sort of move on in a fresh direction. Having said, it is funny. It's got an outstanding first act. I really, really like the first act of this film. It's got some brave character decisions. I have few problems with any of them, but they are different and not necessarily what you'd expect to have become of some of your major characters. But it deals with new themes. It deals with themes of failure. It deals with what if the heroes win and the win is not that great a win. We had Return of the Jedi, but that wasn't an ending to everything. It was a sub ending, if you like. But life carries on afterwards, and what afterwards? What if the peace isn't what you think it's going to be? So there's some really brave stuff in this. There are some major problems. I really don't like the second act of the film very much. There's the sort of the casino planet scenes, Canto Bight, I think are very long and largely unnecessary. And I don't know if it's just a pacing issue, because I like Mark Hamill in this a lot, but I also find when we get to some of the stuff with him and Daisy, it just seems to sort of take a lot of energy out of the film every time we go back to the island. But that might just be me.
I found the stuff with Daisy and Milo a lot more interesting than the stuff with Ray and Luke.
I think maybe I'd go along with
yeah.
that. I really don't know is the honest answer. I'd have to really think about it. But I think that's it for me for now. I have problems with the film. I think the only thing I would want to add before we finish is what will date this episode, obviously, is we cannot and have not seen, because they have not made yet, the final part of this trilogy. And I have worries for the final part of this trilogy. And I think there are fundamentally things in this film that I don't think are necessarily ruinous, but they might be. And on top of that, it just makes me wonder sometimes where the oversight on all of this is. Because I know things are just constantly being changed in train and in transit. We'll just see where we go with that. That'll do for me for now.
Yeah, so in case you don't next film we see Snoke's actually live, and oh, guess what? Ray's actually an Obi-Wan, or something like that.
Who knows? It's a quality film, but it has problems.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I mostly agree with you, Dave. I think you pretty summed it up quite well. One of the things I will say is to add to that, I think it's probably the best looking Star Wars film. I think in terms of visuals and in texture.
I think in shot making as well. Even the opening shot of the film is something we've not seen before. Yeah,
definitely. I think it's definitely the strongest in that regard. It has issues for me. I think a lot of it is scriptive story, character based. The stuff that doesn't work, as Dave said, is the middle end. The middle end. Sorry, the middle part of the film.
We knew what you meant.
Yeah,
the middle act.
The middle part.
Yeah, I mean the parts about the third act doesn't work, but overall, to be honest, it's one of those films which I think if I sum it up, watching it as an experience, I really enjoy my time with it. Though if I had to reflect on it as a film, it's kind of like, yeah, it's okay. And that's pretty much all I'll go for now.
Charlie, what's your opinion of this film? How did you come to it?
It's probably a bit early to say masterpiece, but I'd say very close to that. It evolves Star Wars beyond, The Force Awakens kind of set it up to bring it back and kind of remind us of stuff that kind of we maybe didn't get with the prequels. But what it does is it gives it a sense of evolution and kind of gives it back to the people almost. I just think it's an amazing film. I think it's amazingly written. there's very little I change about it, really.
Certainly, the problems I talk about when I talk about the film aren't the problems that vocal minority. Well, let's assume it's a minority. In fact, let's not speculate on the size of it. Detractors of this film never point at the things I don't like. With one exception, I do occasionally see that Canto Bite stuff goes on a bit. That's all. So I think, it's not. The stuff I hear as complaints about this aren't things I recognise as problems by and large.
Yeah, I think for me, the fact that Luke throws the lightsaber and the fact that's not really Luke, those arguments when they make, I think no, you're fighting a losing argument there. That's not, I don't really see that as a criticism, of the film. It's just that makes kind of sense and that's interesting. What are the other common complaints that normally said? I can't even remember now. But those are the main ones.
Too many women.
The ruining of the Luke character.
Yes, that's pretty much what what it is. It's like especially after Han as well. They always feel a bit like they just shat on the characters and then because theoretically, like that's it. Everything about the original trilogy is over now, and now we have a new one. So I think if I was being I am somewhat sympathetic to it because it is like, something that they love and they just feel like they've just been unjustifiably betrayed by a sense that their characters have just kind of been mishandled and now that's it, they're over and they said we didn't even get like a decent send off. It's just, I understand you're upset, but at the same time, like a lot of the arguments I'd actually find myself not agreeing with, and it's one of those things where I understand where they're coming from, but at the same time, I disagree with what they're saying. I think I don't want to sound condescending to them, but I think a lot of the time I think they're not sure what it is they don't like about it. I don't think they understand that themselves, so they just go to, well, that's not my Star Wars as the go-to response. But that's my general feeling going on it.
Becca, what do you think?
Upon release, I really enjoyed this film. I think out of all four of us, probably like obviously Charlie, and myself as kind of the more. We have more positive things to say rather than negative. But no, I enjoyed it upon release. I think I saw it a few times at the cinema, and for me, I think it does reward like repeat viewings. For a film that was meant to be so dark, I would agree with you, Dave. It is one of the funniest films in the series so far. The opening, which we'll get into shortly, we never knew. Because I managed to avoid some spoilers and secrets about this film. And when you see Edmondson, we were like, "What? We didn't expect this."
Yeah, I missed him first time around. I was like,
"Yeah,
really?
it was hilarious."
I've had to point him out to people.
Yeah, I think he pointed him out to me as well. He was like, "What? Really shit, he's in this."
That's Adrian Edmondson.
Like, how do you not know?
Every time you see Hux stood right next to him.
Exactly.
I mean, he's the guy who says like, "I believe he's tooling with you, sir." It's like, why did I not see it?
That's good fun.
Oh no, he didn't say that.
Because I saw it with my dad, and we're both. That sounds really rude. Big Bottom fans. Fans of the British sitcom Bottom.
I want that on record.
As Becca just told us, she likes Big Bottom. She cannot lie.
What else was the Young Ones? They are the Young Ones together.
He referenced both of them, but he said but he mentioned Bottom particularly. Bottom, for anyone listening, not from this country, an early 90s sitcom, ran for 3 seasons in your parlance if you're not from this country, but they're only like 6 episodes each one. And it was 2 guys basically living in like an apartment together who were just super violent and a bit pervy, put it that way.
Yeah, the jokes was basically
comedy fights with all these sound effects on. It's good. It's really funny though. It is undeniably funny the first time you see it.
It's very classic. It's very classic comedy. But again, lots of the violence is very cartoonish. Like somebody gets hit in the face by a frying pan, and it's very obviously like a rubber frying pan, but you hear like a clang sound, and if somebody else gets their face bashed in a cupboard, it's a very cartoonish sort of.
They have at least one fight per episode.
The Christmas episode Genius. You have to watch that. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's genius. Oh my god, it's genius. But yeah, anyway, yeah, little detour there. Yeah, so yeah, it had some really great lines. I thought maybe perhaps in terms of running time, it was a little bit too long. But it's fine. I can deal with it. Obviously, had some problems like, well, I don't know. When seeing it at the cinema, I kind of the casino scene. I was a little bit like, oh, does this really need to be here? And I kind of struggled with it. But then upon repeat viewings, I thought, well, actually, it's not so bad. It's okay. I can kind of put up with it.
I've always thought they should have done like a mole storyline instead of like going to that casino planet. The Kando, is it called Kando Bite? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
it's a gorgeous design though. Canto Bite.
Oh, it looks
amazing.
I would like to go there. It looks incredible.
I must admit, I do like the establishing shots. It just feels Star Wars. You know, when you see all the all the different kind of animals and the animatronics going on.
It's like Star Wars by way of like a bit of Bond and a bit of like something like The Artist or something like that. It's so many like different references sort of taken together, and it's got kind of a wealth porn aspect to it as well. It's just it is a beautiful. I'm so glad it's there, but when I look at that whole story thread, I'm not a great lover of it.
I think where I started to have issues with it is the idea of the fact that they're being hunted down and they're just like zapping around from place to place. Well, as if that's just okay. I don't understand how they can just like easily. Oh well, fine, we'll just go to this planet. Or if you can just go to this planet, why can't every other resistant fighter just like whiz out then? If the First Order, I keep wanting to say New Order, the First Order,
New Order,
yeah, Bernard Summer, like it's like
did the only decent World Cup song.
Yeah, true. Yeah, why can't they just pick them off? That just didn't seem true to me. I'm like having this like sort of almost like chase.
We'll get into that. We'll get into that in a
yeah.
bit. So
I always thought it was better to have,
is it fair to say we're all pretty positive?
Yeah.
A film that's had a massive backlash against it. Let's not get into who from and the whys, but it's certainly a divisive film. All four of us are going to be ranging from reasonably positive to very positive.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair to say.
Yeah.
I mean, there are
tells listeners where you are. So if you're a Last Jedi hater and you really can't stand 2 hours of people being fairly positive about it, this may not be the episode for you.
No, turn off now.
I'm probably going to be the most negative, and I don't hate it. So
I've got a lot of negatives as well, but the ambition of the film trumps all of it, because in some respects I don't care how the film came out. I'm just glad that they fucking had a real shot at it.
And also, like, of a new trilogy, this is like the difficult middle film, so people are always going to be comparing this to what's come before. And we've already seen, unfortunately, how toxic the fandom can be as well.
Yeah, got to remember as well, the most beloved instalment is a second episode.
Exactly. So yeah, there's literally, it's in a big, it's in a very big, very long shadow, indeed, because that is. Literally just is like the most...
You say what you like about Rian Johnson. It's actually nice to see a Star Wars director announced earlier in the process and be there the way through.
I was really surprised. I thought when they announced him, I thought, oh god, is he still going to be there at the end?
I mean, the solo film ran through two different changes, because that was going to be Josh Trank originally. Then it was...
God, I'm so glad he wasn't attached to it. Oh my god.
Me too.
I mean, shaky Cam Central it would have been.
Was he definitely going to do solo?
I thought it was Boba Fett.
He was on the second spin-off, so you had Gareth Edwards attached to what became Rogue One, and you had Trank attached to what became Solo. And
what was that film that he made about superheroes?
Yeah, that was Chronicle, but that was fan footage.
Chronicle. I enjoyed that film.
It's not a technically bad filmmaker, but I didn't like. Chronicle wasn't a very traditional film.
No,
there was no of the traditional shot making in it you would see anyway. That was only 13 million, and then they hand him like the keys to a huge franchise, and you think, well, give him something a bit more traditionally shot first. Obviously, Colin Trevorrow didn't get through to episode 9. They didn't like his draft and got rid of him. And what else? And obviously, Gareth Edwards got pretty much locked out of the cutting room for Rogue One, even though he remains the director of record at least. So actually, Rian Johnson, I think, was hired in something like early 2013. So yeah, he survived like a getting on for a 5-year process with this film.
Fucking hell, was it that long? It didn't feel like it was that long.
God.
Yeah, I mean, he was starting work on this around the time sort of JJ was still writing Force Awakens. So
You think they hand the script notes over to each other?
well, they did. They did.
Yeah,
they did.
they do.
I don't know.
My points are they were all kept fully informed. It's just we know what JJ wanted, what JJ conceived of wasn't in every case then followed up by Rian Johnson. And what the only thing that concerns me, and we'll get into some of the examples, I think, well, have we got directors just going, well, let's just change that on a? I don't see the same quite, even though they've gone through directors, and I'm not quite sure there's quite the same producer oversight you might expect. I do wonder how well they've mapped this trilogy out. Did they actually know where episode 9 even roughly was going to go when they did 7, for example? But we can get into that as we go along. But yeah, Rian Johnson, obviously, I'd seen Looper. I don't think I've seen, is it Brick? There's a couple of other things he's done.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I haven't seen that for a long time.
I've only seen Looper, which again is another film I like much more in concept than execution.
It's quite stylish.
It's going to be my film theme. What a great idea. You know, really, really
Broker's
like
quite
it.
good from what I remember. I think I only saw it once upon release, but I remember it being quite solid.
Yeah. I like him, and he has gone on. Well, I mean, he's gone on since this film, but back when he was much, much smaller as a filmmaker and sort of making his way, he went on the Slash Filmcast a few times, and it was just like having like a friend on there. You know, he wasn't that big. I mean, you had people like Dan Trachtenberg go on there and see Robert Cargill, and people who are actually making careers for themselves now have got much bigger than when they were on that show. So I was aware of Rian Johnson years ago, and every time he spoke, I just thought he was so reasonable. If there was ever a director I would back to sort of weather the sort of backlash that's come with this film, I think Rian Johnson is just the sort of level-headed type. And I do think he's a very accomplished filmmaker. Shall we discuss this film sequentially, folks?
Yeah,
Let's
let's
do
go
it.
for it.
Okay. First thing I have to say is, Charlie, the crawl in Serbian, please.
Or in a language of your choice.
Italian, go for it.
As is traditional, Charlie, roughly what is in the crawl?
Oh, I've got it in front of me today, so I'm cheating.
All right.
En français, please.
See, what I would have done is just ummed a bit, changed about 4 words, and otherwise got it bang on, and then we'd have gone, that's impressive.
Well done. Yes, what does it say, Charlie? Let us know.
Yeah, I can't read it in Serbian because I can't. I literally.
English is fine.
Oh wait,
English
no,
is fine.
I can do it. Pravineret levado. Na konstoje unistada morna republika. Vernoflida Snoke, sada primon jojo, nimolos nervost, lega duzasma voska controller galaxy. Samo General Le Organa, band of resistance fighters, stati prota frasta tyrannijo, is Vesni Jedi Meshlo, Luke Skywalker. Ke verati e verati vanaku od nadaj se ubobo. Ali otpo jebayo is lozeno. Ka prevered resin prema buntunove basi herapi heroja ze spustachu okajaniki bekstvo.
You have the worst German.
That's not German, though.
Sorry.
Well, I think that was good pronunciation. But again, Charlie.
I shall get in touch with my Serbian friends and say,
But I kept thinking that it sounds like it's like some sort of weird alien that like you'd find in like a cantina bar or something like that.
That's very good though. That's good. Probably better than the rest of us could do.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'd just be murdering it completely.
Okay. We had to do something like that after last time. The gist is that the First Order are in the ascendancy. The First Order have control now. And they are a little bit sort of like Hoth, I suppose. They're about to finish off the last few.
Yeah, so what's happened between now? Because I am a little bit confused by what's the time frame from the Force Awakens to this.
It's immediate. Think about where Rey is at the start of this film. It's instant. It follows right on.
Yeah, because I mean, Starkiller Base was aiming at the Resistance base, wasn't it?
In fact, it reminded me of the Bourne Ultimatum, in that the last scene of the Bourne Supremacy takes place like 2/3 of the way through the Bourne Ultimatum. The first act of this film takes place before the final shot of The Force Awakens.
So there's a little bit of time narrative, a little bit, but like a little bit of a time jump.
No, there's no time jump at all. There's no time jump at all. Basically, in the period where Rey's sort of flying off to give Luke find Luke and give him the lightsaber, this battle occurs. So by the time the battle finishes and we catch up with Rey, we are watching a recreation of the last scene of The Force Awakens.
That's what I mean. So The Force Awakens kind of like jumps ahead of the Last Jedi bit at the end when Rey meets with Luke, and then the beginning of the film is like catching up to that point.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
That's how I read it anyway. First thing I noticed was we came off this crawl. I didn't notice it was in Serbian at the time, but there you go.
It goes down.
And I just love that opening shot down through all those crafts. That's one of the best shots I've seen in the whole Star Wars saga.
Yeah, it's pretty stylish, isn't it?
It's one of the things I like about this film. It is just, again,
Great
how it's
shot,
a texture. Like, even when you see the New Order ships, fucking hell. The First Order ships.
Yeah.
The Human League.
Yes.
Yes.
They're only human. So they'll be seen like sort of like literally hit light speed like from the sky. I just thought that's an impressive shot.
It's a wonderful, it's a real wonderful shot to open this film. We go down to like the Resistance base. I think the first thing we see is it Billy, Carrie's daughter, has a role in this film.
It does. It's a very nice way to honour.
Well, don't forget Carrie was alive when they did that, so it wasn't a tribute to her.
But I think to have, obviously, because you've got Mark Hamill's children to feature in the film as well, so it's nice. It's considering it is like, her last film, her last Star Wars movie. Obviously, looking back on it, it's not sort of tribute sort of thing, but looking back, in a kind of retrospective way that we do, it's a nice tribute to have Billy Lords, which is very nice.
Yeah. The dog isn't in it, but yeah.
I know Gary doesn't have a role.
Yeah,
Gary's amazing.
Is he?
Yeah, he's probably in there.
Okay.
But
he's like an alien dog in the casino.
He's got a really long tongue poking out.
So he play the thing that puts all the coins in BB-8?
Probably.
No, we start off with effectively this is the more or less what's left of the Resistance. I keep going to call it the Rebellion for obvious reasons. They are about to be attacked by the First Order, and that will basically be curtains if they can't get away. So Poe Dameron flies right at them.
Yes, and that's why I had that very humorous opening line.
This film was funny. All the way through. I like the Poe Dameron character. Anyway, I've heard complaints about him as like a cut price Han Solo and stuff, and I don't get that. He's nothing like Han Solo, at all. He's not meant to be either. And Oscar Isaac is a slightly sort of Pacino-ish actor to me, actually, in build and stature and everything, and very, very charismatic in this and very funny in this. And it's just I don't know. It reminds me of it was one of the Family Guy Star Wars. I think it was something Dark Side, the Empire Strikes Back one. Because there's a bit in the film where Luke gets into on Hoth and he gets into his whatever that craft is, and his pilot, the guy behind him, says, "God, I feel like I could take on the Empire by myself. I know how you feel." Well, in the piss take, Family Guy's, "Hey, it's all right, Gary's got this." So he flies up by himself right in front of the Empire, and he's like, "Suck it, bitches!" And they immediately blow him out the sky. And it's a bit like that. This fucking like dreadnought thing, the fucking that Hux is on, it's massive, and he just goes right at it in this little fucking X-wing.
Yeah, it's just like balls of steel, like with this plan. But I like how it tells how his plan is executed. It's like, oh shit, that makes fucking sense. Like he's just like stalling them, and then sort of like getting in there before they can actually launch their TIE fighters. And it
actually fits into the narrative and visual canon of Star Wars, because that's what they were trying to do in the first film. Stay close to the surface so that the sort of ground to air cannons can't pick them off.
Yeah.
And he's trying to do a flavour of that. Take out those cannons from close range.
Yeah.
So where do we go from? So what's he trying to do? He's trying to take out those cannons. So
yeah. So it basically gets a sequence where he does just take out the dreadnought's cannons. So it leaves it susceptible for bombing. Yeah.
And if we weren't aware of the stakes, we become aware quite quickly, because most of these sort of bombers do get picked off.
Yeah.
Most of them do. Even with all the damage he's done, most of them do get picked off. And we meet, what is she called? She's got a she turns out to be Rose's sister.
Rose's sister?
Yeah. She would be named, because every character in Star Wars
have a name.
Yeah, that's it.
Paige.
Okay. She is aboard the bomber that actually delivers the payload.
Yeah.
And we see that little visual thing she's holding on like a necklace, which we'll see again a bit later on. Bit of drama about whether she manages is going to drop it, but again, that's just typical action scene stuff. But I really like it. I really like this as an act one of the film. It's ballsy, and it's almost when you think there are some echoes of Empire, but it's actually a bit more preemptive than that. So I like it.
I think it hits the ground running.
Definitely.
Like, you know, I mean, when I first saw it, I was thinking, oh, well, this is kind of like Empire, then you're starting off with. But it is like a lot pacier. It goes straight into it, and there's no so it doesn't leave you much time to.
So basically, they blow up a dreadnought and get to hyperspace.
Yeah.
Which, in the normal run of things, would be it. Really, in terms of that initial chase. But of course, what we find out a little bit later on is they can track them. Now, this is where I talk about the influences on Star Wars being slightly different this time round. Did any of you watch the remake of Battlestar Galactica in the 2000s?
Yeah.
I didn't, sadly.
I haven't.
Okay. Well, you had
I remember you talking about it, though.
You have a mini-series to start with in 2003, and then 2004. So I think of it as like episode 3. It's not. It's actually the first episode, but I was counting the miniseries. They started the first season proper with an episode that I think is called the 33s. I think it's called the 33s. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's
called 33 because it's every 33 minutes.
Every 33 minutes, the fleet from Caprica have to basically light jump, if you like, to avoid the Cylons who are chasing them, and they're finding it harder and harder to perform these jumps in time, and they're running out of resources. They're much bigger numbers than this. I mean, every episode of Battlestar Galactica gave you a survivor count, and typically it would be in like the 35,000s or something like that, whereas here there's a few hundred of them. But it's the same basic principle. There's an awful lot of Battlestar Galactica in this.
Yeah, which is not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing at all.
I keep hearing good things about that show, so it's one of those things I've never actually got around to watching.
First couple of seasons are great. It does get
kind of slipped off its rails at the end.
It slipped off the rails. It's worth seeing right the way through, but I suspect with a lot of shows they didn't know where they really wanted to go with it. But first couple of seasons are great, and they do quite well with not a massive budget. It's like a sci-fi show. A sci-fi channel show, and so they don't have the most amazing budget. They still provide somewhat passable CG and stuff like that. So yeah, that's very much an influence on this. What we later find out when we meet the Rose character is that they're tracking them. So they jump and they go to a far distant place, but the Empire First Order can immediately tell where they've jumped.
Yeah.
So, where do we go from there? After the battle, I think the first thing we see is Finn.
Yeah,
Finn landing.
Finn wakes up from his coma thingy.
Well, this is from the injury. This is another thing that tells you no time's gone by, really. Remember, he was badly injured at the end of The Force Awakens.
And, and he's asked, where's Rey? And then we cut to Rey, standing on that rock, handing Luke his lightsaber.
He's been doing that for a long time.
He fucking has.
All of a sudden he just goes whoop, over his shoulder. No, I'm not going to do that.
I must admit, I laughed when that happened. I kind of like... I think at least scoffed. I can't remember if I actually audibly laughed, but I think I...
That's like the two biggest laughs I remember seeing it in our audience. Literally, Aid Edmondson, and then again... Mark Hamill going, nope, tossing it over his shoulder.
Who does nothing funny. So if you've never heard of Adrian Edmondson, or you're a younger viewer and you're at the cinema, and this middle-aged bloke appears on screen and says pretty straight dialogue, and people fall about laughing, you must wonder what's going on.
All the oldies are like, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Or anyone over 30.
Yeah, so Rey is on that island that we saw her at the end of the last film, handing Luke his lightsaber. Luke sort of stares at her for a minute and then just throws it over his shoulder and walks off and straight back to... It's kind of like a stone igloo, isn't it?
Yeah. I like this because it's just an anticlimax. You know, I can't see a better way to do that.
Yeah, but they finally found the heroic Luke Skywalker. Now, what we're going to find out in this section of the film is that Luke has... we don't find out about his relationship to the Force in this section. I think that's next time we come back. But we certainly find out that he's gone there to die, and the Jedi, he wants no part of the Jedi. They don't need to end. And when she's saying to him things like, you know, the First Order will have wiped out everyone within weeks and so on. He says, what do you think I'm going to do? Go out with a laser sword in front of the entire First Order and sort of by myself? Which is kind of what he ends up doing a bit later. But, yeah, and this gets to the heart of one of the big controversies of the film. One of the big reasonable controversies of the film, in that a lot of the stuff when we talk about Kelly Marie Tran later, I've got no time for at all. But I will at least debate people who say they've ruined the Luke Skywalker character. They haven't.
Yeah, in a nutshell, they haven't.
No, they haven't, because Luke Skywalker is 30 years older.
Exactly.
And I think most of the people who make these complaints haven't even lived fucking 30 years.
No.
You change over time, and your passions can die. You know, your passions can die. Your fight and spirit can die. And if you come to believe the creed of which you were a part is actually more dangerous than anything else, because the skills you're teaching people are empowering them to cause damage if they don't stay on the light side of the Force.
Yeah, naturally you're going to be on the back.
Then naturally
side,
you're going to say the safest way for me is to just guard these texts and just stay away from it.
Exactly. And plus you've got new people like Rey coming through as well, so he's kind of merely taking a back seat so that the next generation can come through.
I think he's just come like cynical about it all now. I mean, that's probably the thing, because Luke in the original trilogy was like the guy who was just, you know, always full of hope.
Wide-eyed.
Yeah,
Very
and
wide-eyed.
Exactly, literally.
And yeah, I mean, I can't see any other better way to go. If we are picking up from a timeline, it's like, okay, what the fuck happened to this guy? You know. And it's like, it's the stuff you do like between that, I think. I mean, the only thing I'd say that does let it down is more a case of, I don't think they delve enough into the character enough in the film. Well, that's my only thing. The actual decision to...
There's really only one scene, isn't there, where he's explaining how if you scratch beneath the surface,
yeah,
and the failure of the Jedi, which we'll come to a little bit later on. My only problem with the Luke and Rey stuff is, pacing-wise, it just deflates the film every time. We follow something for a bit and then we cut back to this island and there's more, I'm not training you, or there's more whatever. The fact that Luke isn't this sort of heroic trainer of Jedi and this grandfather of the craft sort of figure doesn't bother me in the slightest, because actually people do get very cynical as they get older. People get a bit burnt out as they get older, and a bit more negative a lot of the time as well. So I don't think any of that is that unusual. But also I think that sort of new Jedi Order and the sort of EU stuff, it's okay if it's a book or it's a comic book and you could just have new adventures and the next generation and all the rest of it. We're trying to tell a story over a number of parts here. And I just think, well, what do you achieve if you just have Luke training a load of like cheesy fucking new generation Jedi? I don't know what you think, Charlie.
No, absolutely. I mean, yeah, given it's been it was 30 years between this film and the previous film, and you have no idea what's gone on in those 30 years that could have affected this. And obviously what we see is a big thing. And again, it kind of links back to what happened with Obi-Wan and Anakin, and the kind of echoes of that.
But I thought I could train him just as well. I was wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah, but and then it's almost like, but Luke's kind of gone onto a different path in terms of how he's dealt with that.
Well, I suppose Obi-Wan became a hermit, but I suppose that was also, he was watching Luke, to be fair, or young Luke. I just think that this is almost the exact opposite of The Force Awakens as a film, for good and ill, because The Force Awakens is a real breezy, easy watch. I mean, if I had to throw one on now, I'd throw on The Force Awakens. It's an easier film. But The Force Awakens, if you look at the way they dealt with Han, I've still got mixed feelings on bringing him back, to be honest with you. But they bring back Han, but they treat him a bit like you would treat almost a comic book character, in that they've treated him as an archetype, not a character.
Yeah.
So they just bring back the superficial traits we're kind of familiar with. So he's a rogue and a smuggler. In fact, they've had to sort of almost de-evolve the character a bit, you know. So they've had his marriage fail and him go back to the roguish type we knew when the series started, perhaps with a slightly better heart because of the lessons he learnt in those films, but nonetheless. So that creates one type of complaint that you go, well, 30 years have passed and he hasn't fucking budged an inch. He's the same character. Luke is treated much more as a character, as a real person, and allowed to grow and change. That brings out a different type of complaint, because fanboys will have. Fanboys is pejorative. I don't think everyone who would have this complaint is one. So let's walk that back a bit. People who might complain about the Luke character, I think in a lot of cases it's not what you either expected from the character, have come to think of as the character in later years from the EU, or what your extrapolation would have been of him after Return of the Jedi. And I think that's where I defend the right of creators to create. And frankly, you can change to any degree in 30 years. And with the story we're told, and a life that, you know, before he's even 30, probably, Luke wins, you know, the greatest victory you can imagine, overturning, you know, an evil empire. And then for decades afterwards, he has to watch it not be quite the victory he thought it was. And, you know, he tries to carry on the work of this faith that he was all wide-eyed and positive about. And he finds, actually, he can't really do it, or he can't do it well enough in his own head anyway. I think this is entirely where, like, Luke could be.
Yeah, I mean, because basically what happens, I mean, I was skipping ahead here, is he sees, there's the line where he says, I've never seen this raw power before, as in Kylo. It didn't scare me now, so that's why I think that's one of the things I thought maybe my criticism of Rey, of being like, oh, that's not just my criticisms, it's a lot of other people's as well, being like overpowered of the Force and all that stuff. It's like, well, if they explained it like, well, Kylo was like that, and they could very well be the case, and it's just like, they're just not really.
But there is a theme through the first two of this series now, that the Force is something that they're the Force and the power it conveys is something that is evoking fear.
Yeah. So
in
like
a way that it did in the other trilogies.
What I mean is like this kind of raw, like natural ability of the Force. Like it's a skill like, oh shit, I can just naturally use Force. You know, no one's ever been this like naturally gifted.
Yeah.
And Kylo could have had that same thing before, so it would have been like, oh shit, no, things are changing. Also, it's like level of like disgusting himself of like, oh, I was actually thinking of doing it. I was actually thinking of killing him in his sleep, and it's kind of like, fuck, what have I done? And I deserve everything that's coming at me now. And everything.
But I think this film, this film is deconstructing its characters in the same way that it's almost deconstructing the series. In that, we're used to like the big bad being built up over a number of episodes, like the Emperor was in the first trilogy, and I've got problems with the way they deal with Snoke and stuff, although they won't properly be addressed until episode 9, and it might turn out I'm perfectly happy, but certainly Snoke ends up being a bit disposable, and I'm not too happy about that in some respects, but there's a bravery to all of this. There's just a bravery of allowing Luke not to be perfect, because he didn't raise a load of perfect Jedi. He had a go at it, and it didn't work out. And in fear, he nearly did the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But he didn't. He just nearly did, or he thought about it.
And that's almost like the tragedy of it. It's like that slight moment of weakness or hesitance kind of like condemns you, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Where do we go from there? Do we see...
Yeah, we go straight to Kylo and Snoke.
I was going to say, it's got to be Kylo next, hasn't it?
Yeah, it is. And we get to see Snoke properly first time. And, I really like Snoke. I think Snoke's actually really impressive in this film.
I'm going to say now, Snoke, I think, is a missed opportunity. I think the characterization is brilliant, but we don't find out enough about him. And it's just a missed opportunity.
Why
I know, but I just feel like, it's just a great character.
Hang on
a minute. From the original trilogy, what do you know about the Emperor?
Well, no, exactly. I don't know a lot about him, but it's revealed more and more and more as you go on, and you know how he became how he is. But it's just like, I do love the character of Snoke. I just think it's one of the great characters in the series, and I love the characterization, and just the way he meets his end is just like, yes. So
it doesn't fit the normal arc of a trilogy. It doesn't, in that you just go, they built him up as this sort of distant threat in the first one. Then we sort of meet him here. Had Lucas probably known he was going to get his trilogy, we might have got something like that in the first trilogy.
It was and then trilogy.
Up close. Well, no, I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about the.
The original trilogy. Oh, yeah.
Now, it's odd storytelling to build this guy up and then discard of him in an almost throwaway fashion.
Yeah. But I like his character, though. I think it's a very cool villainous character.
I'm not going to say it's wrong because I haven't seen Part 9 yet.
Well, no, it's actually wrong, yeah.
Charlie, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think what he's doing here is this, because again, this is Rey and Kylo's story. And you've got Kylo here learning from Vader's mistake. And Vader's mistake was not to kill Palpatine earlier.
Yeah.
And that was what he intended to do, and what he offered Luke out with. And again, we kind of see that later with Kylo. But I think that's Kylo's thing. That's Kylo.
I think there's a bit of him. I've only just thought of this, so it might not be a fully rounded out thought. But I wonder if it's Kylo setting his own terms for how he needs to behave. So when you look at the first film, the first Force Awakens, first in this trilogy, he's almost got to kill his father to prove to himself that he's dedicated enough to the dark side of the Force.
Yeah.
With this film, at the point where he kills Snoke, which is a few scenes further on, so we'll come back to it. But at the point where he kills Snoke, he's nearly been forced into killing his own mother.
Yeah.
And it's almost like he's got to a point where he's thought, why am I doing all this to prove something to this guy who is doing nothing but ridiculing him, knocking me down anyway? I can define what I need to do to prove my own level of loyalty. I don't see that I necessarily have to be killing my mother for that.
Well, he's kind of like taking Snoke's advice, but just using it against him as well. It's like, well, I'll kill my past. I'll kill, why the fuck would I need you? And and all that sort of like belittling also like plays into this kind of like, well, fuck you,
Yeah.
I'm going to be in charge.
Possibly.
It's the whole thing the thing that people picked up was let the past die. And I mean, that's what he's doing. He's killing his parental figures, and certainly his father figures. There's a very much a sense of masculinity and the questions about masculinity here at play here through Han, through Snoke, and through Luke. Because where he hesitates is Leia.
Yeah.
Because he wouldn't have, if Luke was actually there, he wouldn't have hesitated to kill Luke.
No.
No, of course not.
Another thing I thought was just a real statement of intent for the film is they got rid of his mask.
Yeah.
Now, these types of series rise and fall on their archetypes. Like, you can't imagine Indiana Jones out of that outfit for very long. I know we see him teaching occasionally, but that is Indy is the suit, really. Indy is the outfit.
Yeah.
And the same is true of Vader. If Vader had suddenly removed that mask halfway through the second film, because perhaps he didn't need it to breathe, or he only needed it at certain times, I'm not convinced the character would have been quite as iconic.
No.
And I think in rhyming series, you can see how Kylo comes along as a modern analogue of Vader, although they call it out, obviously, in both of these films. So to actually take the mask off and let us see the eyes of the man, I think is actually brave, and it's very against what a studio would normally want to do as its marketing strategy.
Yeah.
So I like
again,
that in a way.
Well, they already got like the masked Kylo anyway, so you can kind of like, well, he's,
but he will now inherently be slightly less iconic, Chris.
Yeah.
And,
I know what you mean.
So you're
he's
making a storytelling decision rather than a business and marketing decision.
Yeah, but what I'm thinking is, I think the marketing and the iconic of him in the mask is already there. So doesn't matter what you do now.
It is, but we're going to end up with a series that's 7 hours long, and he was only in the mask for less than a third of that.
Yeah,
But I think that's the whole
but I think
point
you
thematically
still
is
remember the masters, or you don't really need it from
He's
there.
growing, but he's growing beyond being a Vader copy.
Yeah, he's no longer being the boy that wanted to be Vader, because you can see in this film as well. He's got a cape, a proper cape now. So again, he's even gone more Vadery that way.
Yeah,
with the
I
cape.
hadn't actually noticed, but yeah, okay. Didn't he have a cape in the last one because he had a hood up? Different.
No, he had a longer coat.
It's like a robe, wasn't it? Again,
and then his hood was just like almost like a scarf.
Okay, all right, fair enough. So I liked all of this. Extremely well animated Snoke. I think we're getting to the point where things just look completely real now.
It's very much.
I love his guard.
I thought it was like I thought he was wearing makeup, or he had like a prosthetic mask on or something.
I love his guard.
Incredible.
I love his guard. Well, the other thing is I can see Andy Serkis in his face.
Yeah, you can.
Because obviously we've had facial mocap for a few years now, but you can really tell. Even more than
it's
Caesar,
incredible.
I would probably have guessed that's Andy Serkis, actually.
And you watch like the behind the scenes of it as well, and they tell you basically how they just went in instead of like doing it from the outside in, from the inside out. So they kind of add more like scoliosis to his spine and the rest of it, and they literally build him from the outside, from the inside out.
Yeah.
And that gives a better understanding of the character.
I like his guard though. They're like an Eastern spin on the Imperial Guard.
They're very very stylish. They look very.
What are
slick.
they known as in this, Charlie?
They're called Praetorian Guards.
Right.
Yeah,
I really love them. Real samurai look to them.
Yeah,
do,
the way it's all kind of segmented.
The only thing
That's
about
very stylish.
the only thing I Snoke that frustrated me is let's get back to the point that I would like to know a bit more backstory. Like I wouldn't necessarily want like a whole essay, a whole like I want to know what about from his birth to how he rose to power and all that shit. But just like, how has he got in a position where he is? What is he not a Sith? What is he?
That's what I mean. That's
Yeah,
what I mean.
what are
I'd
the
like to
Knights
hear
of
a
Ren?
little bit more.
Just a few lines of dialogue, or even just a hint, just to suggest, just to fill in a few gaps. Because I'm just a bit like, okay, where the fuck do these guys come from? Who are they? What are you about? And
I mean, hopefully they'll explain it later on.
Why are your guards like fighting to the death after you actually deaf? Why do they give a shit now? As cool as that is, but those are the kind of like things that go, okay, I don't quite get. But apart from that, you know, I do think it's a ballsy move, and I do like how they actually did it, how they actually killed him off.
Yeah, I do feel, I don't know, I feel a little bit the way I did about, it's a different character, they're not analogues of the same thing either, so it's not the best example I could come up with. But I felt the way I did with the sort of Sith apprentices in the prequel trilogy, that, you know, a lot of build-up around Maul, then we find out virtually nothing and he's dead in 5 minutes. It's not quite that, but yeah, I just wonder what, you know, we had all that Snoke in the first film.
But Maul was definitely more of a henchman anyway. So like, you know, when
that's
you
why I'm
knew he was
saying
dead,
it's not an
like,
analog.
well,
There isn't quite an analog for it here. But there was a certain degree of build-up to him, like a new emperor, and there was sort of seeing him over sort of hologram in the last film. And then he's killed kind of quickly and unceremoniously here. And it took me by surprise, and I can't fully comment on the appropriateness of it until I've seen the whole trilogy.
Yeah.
But it did strike me a little bit like the series, like, fucking with us a little bit. And in some respects, that's great, because you're challenging narrative conventions, but on the other hand, it does worry me, because if this trilogy does turn out to be a bit segmented or odd at the end, a lot of it will be, well, 2 actually sort of undid a lot of the work of the first one. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's all.
it just felt like sort of they just completely.
But it's brave,
it.
so bless them for having a go. I'd never have a go at them trying, but I'm just a little bit concerned that, like, how was this mapped out in the overall trilogy? But Charlie's getting closest to it when he actually says that if you look at it through the themes of Kylo's progression as a map, it all makes a bit more sense. Snoke's whole arc is there to service the Kylo story.
And again, comparing him to the Emperor, yeah, like you said, they are messing around a bit as well, because they're taking our expectations of what we think Snoke is and turning that round on its head.
That's where this film wins for me, because you know, we sat through a couple of years of backlash against The Force Awakens, where it's just a facsimile of Episode 4, you know, Control C, you know, Control V, and all the rest of it. And Disney, they don't know how to do anything other than play it safe and just all that kind of thing. This is a ballsy piece of filmmaking. Hence, I think it was always going to be somewhat divisive, even if you forget some of the worst parts of the fan base. There were always going to be reasonable people who watched this and didn't get on with it.
Oh, definitely, because it does like take you by surprise. Like, whoa, okay, what we're doing here? What's
like? Okay, where are you going with this?
Yeah. But we've kind of jumped ahead now, talking about the death of Snoke.
We have. So obviously, the whole point of the first scene is putting Kylo in his place, calling out that I thought you'd be a successor to Vader and all that, and him saying, "Well, I killed my father. You know, what else do you want?" And I think that does egg him on, A, to smash up the mask, and B, obviously, he's ready my ship. So which is nice callback to some of Vader's dialogue from earlier films, but also he then goes out and does attack because they've traced the resistance because they got a tracker, and the next thing we see is they are basically about to fire on the lead craft, which is Leia's ship, and he hesitates, which is what Charlie's just alluded to, because he senses his mother there. But before he can sort of pull them away from it, or before we even know what he will do, one of his aides fires anyway. And killing, blanking on the name, it's a trap.
Oh, yeah.
Admiral Akbar's killed in that, and Leia's obviously blown out into space. Lots of them are killed. This is the next big complaint we get to, what's been described as
Space
Leia's
Leia.
Mary Poppins The Mary Poppins
Yeah,
scene.
flying through space.
Never had a problem with this. I actually had a problem we got this deep into Star Wars without her showing her Force abilities.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is when there were rare times that we actually do see it.
I think there's a certain. I think it has a certain. I don't think you could have done it any different in that it looks kind of amusing, but in terms of what it is, didn't have a problem with it at all. And Carrie Fisher has already shown me for the first couple of scenes of this film, she's fucking brilliant in this.
Yeah.
She's amazing, isn't she? I think that she's the best. One of the best things about it.
In my view, she was poor in The Force Awakens, and I do think now that was nerves and years away from having acted, because she's just superb in this. The way she puts like Poe in his place,
Yeah.
she demotes him. It's like, you have no doubt this person's in charge.
And Laura Dern, yeah.
Yeah, that's in a bit. That's in a bit.
Yeah.
First off, she's blown out into space. The Force, she uses the Force to get herself back to the ship, although she is badly injured. Because she's been in the cold vacuum of space for a good few seconds.
I mean, I never had a problem with the idea of it happening. I think, as you say, Dave, it was just the visual aspect.
It does kind of look a bit funny.
It's just like, and when I think about it, I think, well, was it necessarily? But I think what they were aiming to do originally had, obviously, this tragic death of Carrie Fisher. I think they were, I heard that we're going for got a big sort of layers Jedi powers in the next film. I think that's what they were aiming for. So that's why this scene is here, I think, to add justification for it. But there you go. It looks a bit silly, but I understand it's the use of the Force and whatnot. The only thing that does bother me a little bit is, when she goes in to the airlock, and it's like, oh, how do they not get sucked into space opening up? The shot conveniently just sort of like just.
I imagine they've
away.
got force fields on the bridge. I imagine that's what they did. I think they had previously when it blew out.
Presumably.
I'd never really thought about it.
But you know what I mean? It's like, hang on, that's in a vacuum of space. But yeah, I mean, that'd be one way of explaining it. But...
Yeah, you could just imagine them being blown out into space and Poe sort of mouthing.
She's tapping on the window. Let me in. Okay.
Yeah, and then like Poe, the last thing you see is Poe sort of slowly freezing and mouthing. We didn't think that through, did we? Yeah. Okay, do we go back to the island from there? Logically, that's where you'd imagine we'd go next, wouldn't we? We don't go straight to Holdo and Leia's replacement, do we?
No.
But
doesn't matter which way round,
yeah.
I suppose.
Luke eventually relents.
Offers her 3 lessons.
Yeah.
And the first one's one of the funniest bits of the film. The first lesson, he says, 3 lessons, and I will teach you the way of the Jedi and why it must end. Or they must end, whichever way you put it. And the first lesson, interesting just from an effects perspective, that was all done on a stage. And they shot some plates in Ireland. Everything where they're sat on that stone is a stage. Which is kind of impressive, because you wouldn't think for a second she wasn't outdoors.
No.
It's just where she says, what is it, reach out?
Yeah.
She puts her hands out.
He's tickling her.
Well, that's the Force, is it? Whack. Yeah.
Oh, you mean reach out as in?
Yeah. And I just love the sort of the sense of, because all the way through this film, we're going to see a connection between Ren and Rey and Kylo, and he's indicative of like the pull of the dark on her. And she's got a power she doesn't understand, which could really be utilised for evil, because she's clearly extremely powerful. And the first time she shows this power to Luke, she goes straight to the dark. Great scene. What did you guys think?
Yeah, it's great. And I think they've got great chemistry as well together.
What, Luke and Rey?
Yeah. He's
Definitely.
really and Mark Hamill.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would agree as well.
I think Daisy Ridley's one of those actresses who's going to turn out to have like chemistry with everyone.
Yeah.
I find her very charismatic. This is quite like magnetic to watch.
It's just a warmth and openness to her as an actress.
Very lovely. Was taking off to her great uncle or whoever it was in Dad's army.
Well, Arnold Ridley, so really.
No, but I think she's a very good actress there, and she's very promising, and she's brilliant in whatever she does.
She could have a really good career, but we'll see.
Hopefully she does, because she deserves it.
You never know. But I mean, I know she was sort of in the frame for that Tomb Raider film, and they ended up giving it to Alicia Vikander, and I don't think Alicia has the same interpersonal chemistry with other actors that Daisy has. No matter how good an
film,
actress.
I think maybe if they do another reboot, maybe somewhere along the line they would cast Daisy. She's very much an action role model. But yeah, I think going down the Tomb Raider, I think on this occasion, Alicia Vikander was the right woman for the job.
I
Anyway,
disagree. I'd have totally had Daisy Ridley over her. But anyway,
yeah, that's another film for another time.
That's another film for another time. Which we'd have to really run out of franchises to do.
We would. I would rather scrape the barrel.
We would have kind of talked about it the other week, haven't we? So.
Well, we have.
Yeah, we sort of did. Never mind.
No, we have. We've done part one of our summer review.
Yeah,
even though we haven't even got
or spring review, as it should be called.
Oh yeah, because we haven't even hit summer yet. Okay, so
18.
we must be getting to the point where. So that was the first lesson. We must be getting to the point, if we haven't gone there already, where we're introduced to the Rose character. We must be getting to the point.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It changes, but yeah, it would have been, yeah. Because Finn's trying to find Rose. Not Rose, sorry.
Find Rey.
Yeah, find Rey.
It's his very first line in the film, like, Poe says, you must have loads of questions, and he says, where's Rey?
Yeah.
It's only one thing he wants to know. Really efficient writing. And now, I want to avoid a lot of the politics we talked about last week, but let's just talk in general terms about the Rose character. Because I really like this character.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, a lot of people bashed her, and it's like, well, why?
I thought she was a pretty good actress. I thought she had some drive from the loss of her sister. And also, it fits in with that Star Wars tradition of showing us from the point of view of the lowliest characters.
Exactly, she is just by the nature of where her is.
I don't necessarily like everything they do with it, because I don't like the Canto Bite stuff, but I like the character.
I think it's mostly the Canto Bite stuff.
It's become conflated with that, unfortunately. It's just the fact that she's taken the brunt of it.
I'll be honest. Yeah, I think it's mostly down to that. I mean, I'm not particularly taken with the character. I don't hate her. But that's just it. I don't find anything remotely appealing about it. It's not the actress's fault. I don't think it is. I think it's just a character that's there. But
that's implying to me that you find her a bit bland, if anything.
Yeah, kind of a bit bland. Or kind of a little bit no, know-it-all's not the right word, but. A bit
she's trying to do the right thing, isn't she? Really,
I think preachy is the thing. Is probably what I'd probably say. It's just it's kind of like an unearned kind of sense of like what's not saying again. It's not know it all. It's like of grand sense of morality. It's like, oh well, this character knows everything, or is like the wise wisdom, and I don't think it plays that well. I don't think it speaks well to John Lawrence's, regardless of what the trolls say. I think the hate is undeserved, and they should never attack. Yeah,
she's not in the frame for worst Star Wars.
No. I mean,
that's unwarranted.
To be heard from those who didn't like.
I mean, I feel sorry for Hamid Best. I mean, imagine back then, thinking, "Fuck, I'm gonna be in a Star Wars film."
Oh dear.
Yeah.
When
having the hated character ever.
Yeah. So, I do have sympathy for it, and that aside, I don't think the character works as well as for some has hoped. But hey, there you go.
I should have known better.
She's not the worst character ever.
I didn't come out even expecting any kind of backlash or thinking that's a weak character. Even I just thought, Star Wars has a history of showing us things from those perspectives. Traditionally, in the earlier episodes, it was the droids and stuff like that. Well, it was just quite interesting to see Finn, particularly in her first scene, to see Finn like hero worshipped and then immediately deconstructed within about 2 minutes. I liked that, and I liked the fact that it's about almost finding that bravery within yourself, because she just thinks of herself as a lowly member of the crew. In walks this amazing hero, Finn, and within 2 or 3 minutes, it's actually revealed to her that it's quite possible she's braver than he is.
I think you touched on, I think, probably and the reason why I don't think she's as popular. I think she detracts from Finn. I think, or like people, like fans and general audiences, actually like Finn as a character, particularly from The Force Awakens. So I think one of the major complaints is Finn is rather underserved in this film. And I think a lot of that is down to
Poe
Rose.
was in the last one for reasons we talked about at the time. So I guess that could happen. And like I say, the second act of the film, she's with him off doing stuff I don't find that interesting. And I would he is best off being around like Rey and Poe, because he has a very unique chemistry with each of them, actually.
But she's the one that really kind of helps change his direction and helps him decide that where he wants to be.
What do you like
about the character? What do you like about the character, Charlie?
I love that she's really, really human. I love that she's us. She, like you said, she's a hero worshipper. She's the kind of character.
5 seconds.
She's awkward, she's awkward. With the first time we see her, she's crying her eyes out. It's kind of this is the complete opposite from, like the kind of strong entrances that we're kind of used to with these characters. And from there, you see the arc that she's been given with what happened to Paige and what happened to the family, and yet what the First Order did to their homeworld, and where she comes from that, and where that fits in with Finn's journey, where he's still not a resistance person, a resistance fighter. He wants to find Rey and run, because he still thinks that the First Order will prevail and will kind of come and get them all. And that's what, for me, why I still find the Canto Bight stuff really interesting, and I love Rose as a character, because I think she complements Finn really well, and she's almost like his conscience. Because he's a stormtrooper, so he's not had any kind of life experience outside of being in the military and being in that outfit. So when he
at this point in the film, his life experience is effectively about 2 months, probably at most.
Exactly. Yeah. So when he goes to Canto Bight, he sees all the woe and he sees all the lights and he's impressed.
He hasn't seen the other side, has he?
Yeah.
No, I do get that. A lot of my problem with Canto Bight isn't about the principle of them going there, because I think it's incredibly beautiful to look at, and the sort of messages fit in with the film. But it's a whole lot of... We'll come to it anyway.
The
only thing I'll disagree with that, though, Charlie, is in regards to Finn. I think had Finn woke up from his coma, like, in the same place that he is at the end of the film, we wouldn't have noticed. And that, to me, tells, like, there is just a lack of character aggression in that character. And that's my opinion. And I think that's probably where I am with it. I think...
What do you mean?
I don't think we would have, like, noticed had Finn had woke up from his coma from where he... to the point where he actually ends the film. I think we would have, like, just accepted that. I don't think there's actually much growth.
I don't understand.
I don't think it's much
you got
growth
the whole
there.
Rebel Scum thing when he fights Phasma and that
whole
thing.
No, he's already there at the end of Force Awakens.
But he's not.
I disagree, but...
He's literally... He does everything in The Force Awakens for Rey. He goes back to Starkiller Base. He knows that, obviously, his thing... Because he lies. He lies about it. He says...
Yeah.
He says that he knows... that he knows how to disarm the shield. He lies about it, but he lies about it because he knows that he has to get down there and he has to save Rey. That's what he cares about.
In fact, I think it's the opening clip on our Force Awakens review when he reveals to Han like he doesn't really know what he's doing, and he says, "I'm just here to get Rey."
Yeah. And I'm not saying there's no character progression. I'm just saying there's very little, and I don't think we would have noticed had he woken up in the same place as where he ends the film.
Okay, I'm a bit ambivalent on it, to be honest with you, because I see both of your points, which is.
I mean, like I think that the main problem with the Finn and why people is that he's kind of like a coward through and through throughout the entire both films. I don't think people actually want to see an actual progression, or like wants him to find his courage a bit more. And I think it's been undermined by the Rose character. I'm not saying blaming the Rose character particularly, but
he's going to find his courage.
You have lost me there, because that's entirely what he does in the third act of the film.
Yeah, and again,
serious moments taken away from him.
How?
What when he's going to like sort of commit essentially suicide for...
Yeah, which is stupid. It's a stupid act. And the whole thing is what she says to him. And again, this is why I love Rose as a character. And when she says...
And actually, he found his balls when he was stood over Phasma.
Yeah.
The Rey, the sequence at the end of the film where he goes to fly into that thing...
Yeah.
Is actually just an expression of that. That's not where he finds himself. He's already found himself. That's just an expression of that. But Rose is there I will say, that in.
The scene when he was with Phasma is when Finn works. So, but I do find that
how satisfying you find it is obviously a different matter. But there is an arc there. There is an arc there, and I think it is driven by the Rose character. He hasn't spent any time with ordinary people, and he hasn't spent any time with like victims, really. Do you know what I mean? People who maybe have suffered at the hands of... Because Jakku was kind of, a bit like Tatooine in its way, which is kind of an analog from out in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of even, that is pretty much nowhere, as Luke says. So there's this feeling that it's almost outside of the Empire, not the Empire, the First Order. First Order wasn't in charge by then. So you just had Rey going about her business, kind of minding her own business. What he hasn't met yet, really, and spent real time with, is people who have a tale to tell about the way the First Order have affected their lives. And I think that's kind of important. Yeah, where do we go from there? We've got...
Holdo's.
I was going to say we must have Holdo. They introduced now... Yeah. I've noticed this every time I watched it, and I can't decide if it's the two actors or the way they're shot. But Oscar Isaac, obviously Poe Dameron, and Vice Admiral Holdo is played by Laura Dern. I very nearly said Laura Linney then. Laura Dern. That would have been very different.
That would have been very difficult.
They have... I thought, the first time I noticed it on the screen, it was like they might as well have subtitled it. They had a real combustible sexual energy between them. And most people I say that to
really?
don't actually know what I'm talking about. You either see it or
I agree,
don't.
100%.
Every time I see it now, quite often, just after he goes to talk to her after her opening speech, they're shot very intimately. They're shot close in and they're stood very close together. So I think it's physical proximity to each other. But they're halfway between wanting to slap each other and rip each other's clothes off.
Yeah, and I think again that's Rian Johnson playing with expectations of how we are and how we're. Again, this is kind of where Poe does kind of pull away from people thinking he's a Han analog, and where we're used to kind of Han getting everywhere with his charm. And I think that's maybe something Poe is kind of trying to use as well, but here it's not happening. And
again, I mentioned I mentioned how he's a bit Pacino-like. That's A Most Violent Year. It's really obvious when if you watch him in that film with Jessica Chastain, he's very Pacino-like in that. But one of the things that made me think that is Pacino's only about 5'6". He's not a very tall man at all. and they've never hidden it, unlike Tom Cruise. Different genre, because it's action and it's much more alpha male. But Tom Cruise will stand eye to eye with Ving Rhames, even though there's about 6 inches in height between them. She towers over him. And he doesn't have the excuse she's an alien or anything. They're all humans, or
humanoids.
Humanoids, anyway. She towers over him, so there's a lack of vanity. There's a little visual cue that...
like superiority, really. It's like
there's a visual cue to the superiority and putting him in his place. And like I say, not everyone's noticed it, not everyone agrees, but I see quite a strong physical chemistry between the two of them. Becca, did you notice it?
I did, yeah. It was very palpable. You could definitely, I'm surprised the screen wasn't set on fire.
I really
chemistry was such.
But I've said it to people who've gone.
That really would have set expectations. Like, well, what the fuck?
Yeah, Disney are really ruining these films, setting them on fire halfway through.
No, but I did feel a different sizzle between them. But yeah, no, I love their scenes together. The kind of back and forward is quite good. And yeah, I would agree that it was pretty much the Han analog here for sure.
Yeah, so Holdo's now in charge. She's taken over from Leia, who's in a coma. Effectively, she's been bussed in from another sort of ship because they say she's the commander of whatever ship it was. At the same time, and it does follow on. We talked about Rose, but didn't really talk about her scene. She tasered Finn for deserting. She'd already told him she'd tasered about 3 people that day. The very next scene, they're with Poe, and they're discussing how it's her theory, in fact, and he can follow up on this in that he knows how. She believes that they're being tracked because that's the only way the First Order could have found them, and Finn can tell them all how an Imperial ship works in terms of its procedures. So that hatches the plan as to how they need to basically get onto one of these ships, but they need a code breaker because the codes change every hour, which is incredible security when you think about it. And they put kind of a call into Maz, and it's the one bit of the film where I'm just like, oh fuck, I really like this character. I wanted some more Maz in this, and I almost feel like if you're gonna prick tease me with one fucking tiny little scene like this, I'd almost rather she hadn't been in it. Do you know what I mean? Because it was just like, oh no, that was such a waste after the last film.
I love establishing that Maz likes to literally fuck anything. Or at least tries to. Because
that's one aspect here I didn't expect.
Because in The Force Awakens, she's
like, the last film. Where's my boyfriend? She's on about Chewbacca.
Yeah. She's like this close to saying, "Where's that Wookiee? I want to fuck it." Here she's literally like sort of stroking like a gun. Go, oh yes.
She loves it.
She's a horny bitch.
There's more to come from this character. You would hope.
Yes.
The amount JJ put her in the film and the way he shot her and stuff, I think JJ's fond of the character, or JJ probably conceived of the character. So I'd be very surprised if there wasn't a bit more of her in episode 9. How major she'll be, I don't know, because that film's got a lot to cover. But, we'll just have to see. Cover. Well, it turns out that she recommends a code breaker on the planet of Canto Bight, which Rose knows as basically a planet. It's Riser, isn't it? It's kind of it's a planet.
It's like Monaco, isn't it?
It's kind of. It's a planet for
principality,
you to. Yes, because you've effectively got the yachts in the harbour, effectively. And what you've got is kind of an Art Deco Star Wars Bond set. Kind of. It's beautiful though. All the establishing shots in this place are incredible.
Yeah.
But they go there to find a code breaker who turns out to be at like the gambling tables playing like craps or whatever the equivalent would be. And everyone's a bit drunk.
Is it Justin Furrow?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. Stood next to him is and that's
Lily Cole.
That's Lily Cole with him.
Yeah. I keep think, is there any truth in the fact that they originally wanted it to be Lando?
No, I don't think so.
But Billy D. Williams was a bit too hot.
Yeah, it was just a rumour, wasn't it, I think?
No, I think they've always said that they haven't found a place for Lando that they wanted.
Yeah, I'm hearing rumours again for episode 9, but I don't think those rumours are necessarily wrong. I just think conversations leak, and you're bound to discuss if there's a possibility. I think the problem is I've seen Billy D. Williams, and he doesn't look that well. He looks like what he is, an old man.
Yeah,
and I just think I know people age, but let's remember him as he was.
he looks like Grandad Lando.
Yeah.
Whereas at least Harrison Ford has been kind of keeping himself up.
Harrison Ford
because
just
he's
looks,
Harrison
Ford
still
looks
a regular actor.
Yeah, it wouldn't suit Lando either, would it? Really, because it's how he is as a character.
Yeah, not only that, it's just I just think that with Han, that's 2 character arcs you've undone, and at least with Han, he effectively lost his son, so that might be explainable.
It's
but
pointless.
Lando went from a bit of a fucking playboy to really quite serious by the end of the 3rd film. If you suddenly caught up with him and he's an old man pissing around in a casino, I'd be like, oh, for goodness sake, either bring them in as characters and let's see where they are now, or leave them out. I don't want the archetype. These aren't James Bond films, But at the Canto Bight stuff, I was really keen when it started because it's so beautiful. And when we go around this casino and you've got funny droids and drunk people and, gambling and, a real smoothie as the guy who's obviously meant to be the original codebreaker. It looks wonderful, doesn't it?
Yeah, it looks amazing. And that opening shot, the wings shot, is just amazing.
Absolutely. So we cross-cut back to and from Canto Bight. To cut a very long story short, they end up being imprisoned there because they're sort of spotted. We must
To
go
get a
back
parking ticket, basically.
Yeah, we must. Oh, yeah, it was to do with that thing in the bay. We end up as well. We must go back to Luke and Rey. Then again, I'm not quite sure where the cuts are, but logically that would feel right.
I'm sure at this time they're like force timing with Kylo, isn't she?
Yes, and I read some of leaks as to what was involved in the Colin Trevorrow plot for number 9, and there was going to be a time jump. And they were secretly in love with each other. There was a couple of other details I won't give away now, just in case they do use them. But there was certainly meant to be a clandestine love between the two of them, and you can see that here. That would not surprise me. And again, wouldn't it be brave? Light and dark being in love with each other like that?
Yeah, we haven't had that for a while, so that'll be very interesting.
We haven't had it at all.
No, exactly.
But it makes complete sense. It's almost to the degree that of course you would have two Jedi's on either side of the Force, having this deep sort of love-hate relationship.
She doesn't understand the power within her, so she's going to gravitate to somebody who does, and he's the same generation as her. So you kind of understand it. I need someone to show me my place in all of this. Well, it needs to be him or Luke, because no one else would know. But Luke's second lesson to her is probably one of his best scenes in the film, because he sits down and explains to her why the Jedi effectively failed. Because you scratch beneath the surface, and at their peak, they left Darth Sidious, and it was quite odd. It was the one bit that jarred me.
It almost felt like you reviewing the prequels, Dave.
Well, it was just because the Jedi were assholes in that. But somebody from one trilogy, the good one, referring to a character named that way in the other one felt slightly odd.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with it, but it just felt odd. It felt odd to have Mark Hamill.
He said laser sword as well, which is weird. They
do use that a bit interchangeably, though. More often than not, it's lightsaber, but every now and again they'll say laser sword.
That's kind of like a reference to George Lucas and the way he would never write lightsaber in the script. He'd always write laser sword. Yeah. Even when he did the prequels.
Yeah. And
that's a bit
little
weird.
Anakin referred to it as that as well. Jake Lloyd referred to it as a sword. Didn't have a problem with that. I just think they do that occasionally.
Yeah, I mean, I expect for a character who isn't like necessarily know that much about the Jedi to say laser sword, but you think like a known Jedi would just say lightsaber.
This turns on its head what Luke's doing here, though, because you think of it as him running away, or just being disillusioned with it all. This is actually Luke proactively choosing a path of action that he thinks is safest. He thinks that he will create room for good to rise in different ways. The Jedi are only one way. They're only one way to interact with the Force. We've already learned in saying you don't own the Force. It isn't a Jedi concept.
Which is good logic, I think. It's actually, of course it's arrogant. To think.
The Jedi, in their arrogance, have missed one of the biggest evil we ever knew. And actually, in trying to change New Jedi, all I did was create Kylo Ren. Or at least enable Kylo Ren. So what he's actively doing is a proactive. It's a proactive, not a reactive course of action, being on this island. And so he's trying to explain to Rey why the Jedi should end.
Is he basically just saying, firstly, I'm just going to let the universe sort itself out?
I think he's saying that I've read it that enabling the Jedi is counterproductive. So it isn't a question of fuck you, sort it out yourself. It's a question of let's remove this factor that actually, in my opinion, is doing more harm than good.
Yeah.
So, but he's still got some respect for the Jedi because he's still guarding the texts and all the rest of it. So it's not that he has no respect for the Jedi at all. It's that they ultimately don't end up helping. That's his feeling at this point. Quite where he makes the leap from that to where he is at the end of the film perhaps isn't one of the most narratively well-explained things. But that's where he is at this point. And yeah, she's force timing Kylo a few times, but you can tell there's a sexual tension because he meets her sort of topless at one point, and she's like, "Can't you put a shirt on?" Or something?
I like how he just flippantly just ignores it as well. He's like, he doesn't even go no, he just carries on.
He should have just dropped his trousers as well without making reference to it. Fuck it, I'll leave a lot.
Is it? At this point, is he still cut himself off, hasn't he, Luke?
Luke has
cut himself off.
Yeah, she actually says to him, "I didn't feel you when I felt all of it. You've shut yourself off." And it's after that he goes and sits up on that stone, recommunes with it, and Leia feels him. So he makes contact with Leia, which almost appears to be the sort of start of her recovery.
Yeah.
On Canto Bight, they meet Benicio del Toro. I don't like this character, and I don't like this bit of the film. This is all a hell of a lot of busy work. I get Hirsch, because Finn is saying, "Isn't this amazing?" Because he's seeing opulence and luxury, which he's never seen before. And she's saying, "Well, look closer," and he sees the animals being mistreated and kids being mistreated and so on. And basically the only wealth of that level in the universe comes from selling weapons and things. But I don't like the Benicio del Toro stuff. Does anyone agree with me on that at all?
The only aspect of the Benicio del Toro that I like is the how he points out that there's no good or bad sign necessarily. The grey area. When how Finn has this idea, people, bad guys only sell to bad guys. It's like, well, actually, no, life's not like this. People sell to whoever's going to buy them. So deep out sell to good guys and bad guys. And this kind of live free and but don't pick a side. You only end up sort of getting killed regardless. So might as well just live for yourself, almost live for the moment, or live as an individual. That part about I kind of thought was interesting and I liked, but everything else is just a bit so what.
I think it's the only part of the film that's predictable, and for that, maybe.
I just didn't like it. It's a 2.5 hour running time. It kind of feels it. It isn't sort of breezy in the same way as something like The Force Awakens was. I can't even tell you how long The Force Awakens is, but they're traditionally just over 2 hours.
I think this is 15 minutes longer, so it's probably about...
Well, so it must be about 2:15 then, because this is a 2.5 hour
something
film.
Like that.
So this is like a 2.5 hour film, and this just feels really long-winded. I understand that they need... See, effectively, all they're going to do... What they're trying to do is get to this tracking device on the, I'm going to say, Imperial ship. This is a very long-winded way around
Is it the
of
Supremacy?
doing it.
Is that the name of the ship?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, they need to do that. I'll make a point when we get to that in a minute, because I'd something thought of it earlier. But anyway... this is a very long-winded way around to it. And I know that Finn has things to learn from Rose here, but I don't find it overly satisfying. It's very long-winded, and the cross-cutting of the film is such that all it's doing is continually taking energy out of the film, because I'm not that interested in this bit anyway, beyond the visuals, which are admittedly lovely. But then we cut to something else, and just as you're getting into that, we cut back to this, and it's like, oh, this is still going on, is it? Not fond at all.
Yeah, I mean, you do think, well, what's the point? Is it point just to find a way to get on board the ship? Is there not like another way? It just feels a bit. It just feels very much like let's make an issue. Where you think, hang on, no, surely
it's a hell of a lot of busy work. It reminds me of the bit. It reminds me of Infinity War, when we waste all that time about fucking Thor making his new weapon, and you're thinking you could have just fucking handed him one, and I would have been like fine with that. I didn't need 10 minutes of fucking busy work on it.
Yeah, let's have an extra sequence on it. Yeah,
yeah, it's just to fill the time between major Thor bits with a bit more Thor. So it's like, well, we'll make up this bit where this is happening. So it's a minor complaint, but. It's getting more major each time I see it, because it's quite a hefty bit of the second act of this film, and every time we're on Canto Bight, I'm like, isn't this fucking done yet? But they do get away with a code breaker. It's just not the one they thought they were going to get. They've got Benicio del Toro, whose character name escapes me. DJ,
yeah.
DJ.
And it was inevitable from the beginning that he was going to betray them.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's the other thing. So he does betray them. He betrays them as they get to the ship. They get onto the ship. They get into like Imperial uniforms. They get right into the area, and then suddenly out comes like a load of like Imperial people and an evil BB-8. and what I wish that had been is actual BB-8, but with a goatee. I thought about that earlier. I wish they'd gone all like Mirror Universe from Star Trek on it and just stuck a goatee on actual BB-8. But yeah, Phasma, who they do fluff for a second film in a row, but we'll get to that. What's the third lesson? So I suppose the next thing is
it was cut from the film, the third lesson.
Right, so the next thing is Ray kind of
when examining she goes to the.
Tell us about this bit, Charlie.
Yeah, because she goes down. It
is like a Coven of the Dark Side. It is a little bit like Luke going into the cave in the second one.
Yeah. And so she goes down to there, and who she thinks she's going to meet her parents or find out who her parents are.
And it doesn't immediately make it clear to us what she saw, in that she saw herself, but that doesn't mean anything, because no one's suggesting she was conceived by the Force.
And then it goes right to her and Kylo.
Yeah.
And then Kylo's telling her about what happened that night and his version of it.
His version is that he wakes up and Luke is stood over him with quite an evil look on his face, ready to summon him down. And before he can, Kylo just calls down a load of basically caves the roof in on him. That's his version of the story. later we will just do the
And
three
it's true
versions.
from his perspective. Like, that's what he would
Well,
find.
yeah.
It is
Certain
actually.
point of view.
He woke up and saw that. Yeah, it was all Rashomon style. Yeah, Luke's the other version of Luke's version of the story was that he had kept noticing bits of things through his training, that there was a little bit of the dark side around him, and his power was growing exponentially as well. And so he basically had to wait until Kylo was asleep to go in and basically mind meld with him effectively. I know I'm mixing franchises there, but he needed to use the Force to read him. And what he sensed was so evil that he momentarily was going to sort of take him down. And he clearly, in the way it's shot, has changed his mind, and he's not going to. But Kylo wakes up and sees him with his hand on his lightsaber. It all ends up with the ceiling, the roof being caved in on him each time anyway. We see 3 different versions of it. And yeah, the Luke's version is kind of the true one. It's still equally flawed. He very nearly struck down a sleeping Ben Solo.
Yeah, and we see the fight between Rey and Luke.
Yeah, because after that story, she's like, "Is it true? Did you, they go at each other for a little while, having a bit of a fight up on the rocks there, which is all okay. But again, we keep coming back to we're cross-cutting too much. Now, I understand it from a narrative perspective that you don't want to leave threads hanging for too long, but I think because I'm not finding these sections that wonderful, we keep cutting back to them and you go, oh, right, we're still on this. It's not a clever thing to do in a long film. I mean, even The Godfather 2 only cut like 3 or 4 times in total. And we're cutting a lot between the different stories here. But yeah, so we've now got Finn and Rose in the hands of the First Order. We've now got Holdo in charge of the fleet, and the fleet are and you've got Poe begging her for information and hope to give to people, and she's saying nothing, and they're slowly being picked off each time there's a jump. And obviously the tracker hasn't been disabled. We've got Luke. I think Luke and Rey are pretty much done at this point, and Rey just basically, he refuses to go with her, so she just gets up onto the Falcon, and they try to sort of get her onto an Imperial craft, don't they?
Yeah.
Is that a fair summary of where we are?
Yeah.
Where do we go from there?
So we've got Holdo's. Well, this is where Poe's got his mutiny on, and he gets shot by Leia.
I like that because again, that's that you think you're going to get an emotional reunion, and she just immediately like phases again, mixing franchises, just fires a phaser on him,
And the same
stuns
phaser
him.
she was stunned in the New Hope as well.
Looks like it, doesn't it, as an effect?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fun, folks. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing that annoys me about Holdo, though, is I get that, Poe didn't have command and should really obey orders, but you can really understand his point of view. It's like, we're getting, as David said,
It's how fast they're being picked off. I mean, do bosses owe you an explanation on their thinking most of the time?
Yeah.
No. But they're being picked off rather fast.
Yeah.
And he actually says at one point, we're not going to survive the night.
Yeah.
Tell me something.
And I just don't see the reason why.
The fact is, when he does find out that it's, again, he tells Finn and Rose, DJ finds out and tells the Empire, the First Order. So I kind of have a vague thought with him, but I'm very much on her side.
Yeah, that's why I'm sounding confused, because he didn't have any time with Finn and Rose in that period.
No, he spoke to him over the comm.
Okay.
When they were in the yacht thing with DJ.
That's right. Yes, that's right. And they
Yeah, but didn't know about the ships being picked off though.
Yeah, because he basically told them the plan.
They've all got defensible positions, though, and I like that. The character work. I'm not saying everything always makes sense in every case, because Luke goes from deeply cynical to the Jedi must end to I will not be the last Jedi, and in the interim he'd seen nothing new in Rey, so that is a bit of a jump, but they're behaving how people do, with flaws and everything else, and in a franchise series where you normally get archetypes, that's good. That's really good stuff.
I would have preferred it had they done a mole thing, because then that would have really given Holdo a reason not to say anything, because she's confounded by I can't say anything because we'll be in danger if I could leak it to the wrong person.
Yeah.
That would make sense. I would add a general sort of
instead of them being tracked, it's more that there is somebody within their ranks who is continually telling the First Order
possibly
where they are.
You could run it that way. You could do both,
and
I guess, but
they know that's happening, but they don't know who it is, so they've got to be more careful.
Or don't know how, or they assume, or
That's
something.
just an alternate story version to go, which would be fine. Oh, one thing we really ought to just talk about in between is Yoda's ghost appearing. We nearly missed that bit.
Yes.
Before Rey even leaves, Luke's going on about to burn down the temple, hesitates, and Yoda appears, and it's the puppet. Now, on the big screen, I thought this looked weird, but I've watched it on my home TV in 4K tonight, and the puppet is brilliant. It looks like the Empire Strikes Back puppet. It isn't, but it does look like it. They've recreated him perfectly.
Well, they took it from the same mold.
Well, there you go. So it is effectively the same puppet, just with new material.
I love this scene.
Yeah, tell me why.
I love the humour in it. I love the kind of wisdom in it, and I think you're wrong though. I think it does come after Rey leaves,
because he says she's already got what she needs.
Yeah.
And she's taken the books.
She nicks all the books. Yeah. So I think this is maybe
she leaves. It then becomes night, and he's pissed off and going to burn it down. You're absolutely right. But we're still talking about it in the right place because we've talked about.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So and I think this is part of Luke's kind of
right the way back from where he reveals himself to, or he first appears to Luke. He hasn't revealed who he is.
No.
Yoda was always liked a bit of pissing about and being fun, and he lost all of that in the prequels because they were all written by George Lucas, who isn't funny. It's nice to get that Yoda back.
Yeah.
I don't know what the puppet was a little bit divisive. I mean, one of our listeners has written to us tonight just saying it looked like a toy on the IMAX screen. I didn't see it in IMAX, so I couldn't comment. But he's not surrounded by a load of other CG. The porgs looked vaguely practical to me. So, I think, had you put the puppet in the prequels, it would have looked odd. Because there was so much digital there. I think it works just fine here. And actually, the lighting effect that you get around Force Ghost was added afterwards. He was filmed practically on set, so he was in the shot with Mark Hamill. Mark Hamill went back to being sort of Empire Luke briefly, but Master Yoda, Master Yoda, the Jedi thing. Read them, have you? And suddenly he's talking to a petulant boy again. And funnily enough, in a way, he still is. I mean, Yoda lived to 900 odd years old. Even
they'll always have that relationship, won't they? Even though, he is now the master, as it were, they'll always have that student-teacher.
Yeah, well, I mean, even if Luke is 60, he's a boy next to what Yoda.
Yeah, next to 900-year-old Yoda.
Yeah. I loved
even though he's in his 60s, when 900 years you reach.
The puppet looks great. Suddenly Yoda's moving like the puppet used to move, obviously, because it's being puppeteered. And there is a subtle difference. Like I say, a CG defender generally, but here I thought it was appropriate. It gave it a bit of an Empire callback, and you've suddenly got a much older man in the place of his younger self. That was kind of cool. And it was Yoda being funny again and having a bit of... We didn't see much of that in the prequels. The only bit I can think of in the prequels is where he said, "Lost a planet, have we? How embarrassing." That's the only bit in 6 hours of prequels or whatever it was. So yeah, I like it a lot. So where are we now? We've got Finn and Rose about to sort of throw down, but that's based off Holdo. They're all being picked off. They're in escape pods now. You have a scene between Leia and Holdo, basically giving Poe the thumbs up, really. Basically saying, yeah, he is, but he's great.
All right, really.
Which is cool. It was a bit like when you get M talking about, Bond in the Brosnan era, where it would be like, he's the best, but I never tell him, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So they're all escaping, but they're being picked off. So Holdo performs a light speed jump straight into the
light
fleet.
Speed kamikaze.
I really love that shot.
Oh, of course. It's incredible.
Fabulous. Yeah, it's an amazing shot.
And they drop all the sound out.
Yeah.
I think that makes it all the more effective.
I didn't get an awful lot the commentary is entertaining enough. So when I say I didn't get much from Rian Johnson's commentary, I don't mean his commentary was dull. I just mean I'm not sat here telling you loads of great stories he told. It was just a fairly entertaining 2.5 hours, and at the end of it I thought, I don't know what I got out of that really. But he did talk about how long they took to settle on what this was going to look like. They knew they were going to do this jump. They knew it was going to decimate. But this idea of dropping all the light out and then just having a flash of light come through it and dropping all the sound out, they did endless permutations before they got to it. And I love it. And of course, that distracts those that are about to kill Finn.
Rey?
Yeah.
In the throne room?
Rey is in the throne room with Snoke. And Snoke seems to be trying to taunt Kylo into killing Rey, really.
Yeah.
And of course, he is focusing on a lightsaber, but not that one. Because you think, well, he could read him, couldn't he? But yes,
he was, but he was.
He's misread what he's thinking about.
Yeah.
Because he's got Luke's lightsaber right beside him, and he turns it to face him, and then just cuts him in half. And that's Snoke dead. And then they go straight into a fight with basically his Praetorian Guard. And this is the first Star Wars film from the main saga where there is no scene of two people fighting each other with lightsabers.
Another fun fact.
Yeah, there's no scene in this film where two people go at each other with lightsabers.
No epic
I
battle.
never thought of that.
Yeah.
That's fun, folks.
So is that significant? Does the film is it any less for that, not having that epic battle?
No,
that we're trying to expect?
just an interesting point. It's the first time
the fact that I'd never even thought of it probably tells you what you need to know.
Yeah, it's not.
That's it. No, I just kind of thought, we'll raise it, so never mind.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's like the ultimate thing to do, isn't it?
Battle.
Yeah.
Very cool.
That gives Rose and Finn a window of opportunity. A bit of a smackdown against Phasma.
Chrome Dome.
Yeah, I just think she's wasted again. She's in this for a couple of minutes, and I suppose
we don't see enough of her. She's a brilliant actress. Phasma is an iconic role. We just need to see more of her. More Phasma, please.
For completeness, it is a full arc in that she used to basically torture Finn and boss him around and get him to do horrible things, and he gets his revenge here. So it brings closure to it. But when they brought her back, I thought, oh, brilliant, they'll do a bit more with her this time, and they really didn't.
Nope. Wasted.
Yeah, we'd just like to see a bit more,
Yeah.
I understand, but I at the same time, I don't know where they fit her in, really.
Yeah, I guess
we kind of know
as long as the film as it is.
All we need to know, so.
I think it's more of a presence. I mean, I'm not saying in this film she needs to be in every scene, but it would have been nice to sort of have an idea she might come back for the next one.
Yeah.
But anyway.
At the same time, Kylo is trying to get Rey to join him to rule the galaxy together. Kylo puts Hux in his place immediately. That's quite funny because he comes in ready to fire and all that kind of thing, and it's like, no, we don't have a leader. Yes, we do. So Kylo is now de facto head of the First Order, with Hux as his bitch.
Yeah.
He wants Rey to rule with him. She seems to genuinely think about it, but she's not going to. And then they fight over the lightsaber with basically the Force. What else?
Does the lightsaber snap in half as well?
It basically, that totally tips you the nod as to what's happening with Luke in the third act, but we'll come to that. But yeah, that lightsaber is destroyed. And they're heading for, where is it? They're heading for Crate, isn't it?
Yeah.
The survivors. And they number check at one point, there's 400 of them, and loads of them were picked off after that. By the time they get to Crate, there's a few dozen of these. There is reference to a few allies in the Outer Rim earlier in the film, so there's a few resistance elsewhere, but this is the most desperate situation. This is more desperate than the situation they found themselves in Empire. If you look at the end of Empire, I mean, it's nothing next to the Empire, but there was a reasonable size resistance. They had a big row of craft, and it was like, we'll rendezvous at the meeting point, so there's a load more of us there. They had a workable size rebellion. Here, they're down to what you can fit in a cave. They've got some lifting to do with the next film, because they're in a desperate situation with 2 to 2.5 hours to go in this series. They really do they really pour on the hammering they take.
I think they're going to start sort of years later.
I hope so. I don't want a trilogy to have taken place over 6 weeks.
No, I mean it'll make sense to me, particularly with with the death of Carrie Fisher. It's just easier to move on 10 years from now or something like that. Have a period of time, then you can sort of start fresh. But anyway,
and certainly in the Trevorrow one, there was a time jump of a few years. Yeah, and there's a plot point I can't really say to you, but I will at some point. What else? So the First Order head down to Crate to finish them off.
And this is the thing that everyone thought was going to be a big Empire kind of revisit, but really lasted about 5 minutes.
Officially, because it's salt, which looks a little bit like
Snoke.
Do you mean Crate? Yeah, it looks a bit like
I mean,
Snoke.
the speeders against the AT-ATs.
I think I thought it was going to be a hot redo. But it doesn't actually play like that at all.
No.
And I thought it was a bit of a hot rehash as well, but yeah, luckily it doesn't go that way.
So, so you've got Rose saving Finn from the giant laser.
Yeah. Which a lot of people have complained that has ruined something that would have won them the battle. That rickety craft they were in would have done fuck all.
Yeah.
And also, they've got a load of AT-ATs, or whatever the equivalent is. They're not AT-ATs, but whatever the equivalent is. If that's the ray that's stopping them finishing off the Empire, they've got enough firepower that the loss of that wouldn't have been the end of the world.
Yeah. Oh, exactly,
so she doesn't really change anything. All she does is actually save Finn from what appears to be a futile gesture.
Yeah, and that line where she says, "That's how we're going to win by not by destroying what we hate, by saving what we love," is great.
Exactly. It's amazing.
And the way she calls him dummy as well. It's just great.
That's why I love Rose. She's just amazing.
So then they all get back in there, this old rebel base thing. And
obviously Rey is back on the Falcon now.
Yeah.
So she heads down. So she's out the sort of back entrance, if you like. We find out in a while. There's only one way out of that isn't the front door, which is where the First Order are. And then suddenly Luke turns up.
Yeah.
Now, it was fairly obvious to me because he looked exactly like he did in the flashback scenes with Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, before he was Kylo Ren.
Yeah, he's had a haircut and just from then.
But also, he gets out a lightsaber. It's the blue one from the first couple of films. So it was clearly... I gathered what we were seeing wasn't quite what we thought we were seeing.
Yeah.
I don't think I was aware of astral projection. But it was quite clear immediately this wasn't quite Luke as
he wasn't quite all there, was he?
I wasn't aware of the footprints on First Watch.
I saw it on First Watch, but it's not revealed immediately.
Yeah.
And of course, he has that moment with Leia, and I nearly cried tonight when I watched it.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Very emotional. Very emotional.
And of course, when he palms her the dice, he doesn't quite touch her hand. They deliberately shot that it's ambiguous as to whether he's kind of there or not. Yeah, it's just. I forget the dialogue now, but there was just such a feeling of, this is the last time we'll ever have this.
Yeah.
You know,
it's so sad, isn't it?
I think that's what makes it a little bit worse. Again, I'm quite happy if people don't want to like it, you know, and there are people out there who don't like this film. That's fine, but I think to have seen such a harsh kicking when there's such a beautiful moment in it as that is such a shame.
Yeah,
and we're never going to get these people again. You know, one of them in Han Solo will never come back to the franchise. Mark Hamill could come back as a Force Ghost. That's possible.
Probably will.
But
by the sounds of it.
Okay, but Carrie Fisher's passed away. We're not going to get them on screen together now. We didn't get any Luke and Han together in the last film. And obviously...
I think the only way we're going to do it is obviously motion capture, you know, but it's not the same. It's not the same.
But they won't do it. They're not going to do it.
I just think it'll be against the memory.
They just won't
do it. It'll be like
it.
Sacrilegious.
Yeah, but it's not even a consideration, Becca. They just won't do it.
No, exactly.
Yeah, they've already said they're not going to do it.
They're not going to do it anymore. So.
If you ever did it, it would be like if you desperately need an image in a still. So, you know, if you absolutely needed Leia to be in the back of shot somewhere, but they're not going to do a Peter Cushing. No. They're not, because what they did with Peter Cushing was very different anyway. The actor had been dead for decades.
Of course,
and they never advertised.
Yeah, but I was just saying, if they still needed a U-turn, I thought, maybe we will. But it's like, I know they're actually not going to do it, but that's the only way they could do it. But yeah, I know it's not going to happen, and good, quite frankly.
But I thought it was a lovely moment, and now I'm ambivalent about what comes next, because I always find it a bit. It's dangerous. No, there are dangers in introducing new Force powers because they can feel like Deus Ex Machina. They can feel like, oh, well, the Force can do this, so we'll get him out of it that way. It had not
bringing back people from the dead next and things like that.
Yeah, it had not been established in movie canon. I know it had been introduced in the wider universe, but it wasn't in movie canon. So it felt a bit convenient, and it felt a little bit like, you know how in like Iron Man 3, suddenly you started thinking, well, if Iron Man can do it out of the suit, why would he ever wear the suit? Do you know what I mean? If you can sit and treat it like it's fucking PlayStation or something, you can just have no danger whatsoever. We don't know if that's what killed Luke, or whether he literally chose to like join the Force afterwards to be able to guide Rey, which is what I think happened. It definitely took a physical toll on him because he was exhausted.
Isn't there a line Kylo says earlier when him and Rey are talking about the amount of energy it takes to?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't
To be honest, I did like presume just from the visual, like of how knackered Luke it was by using all his energy to do it.
Yeah.
But he's kind of broken after that.
Again,
and then he gets a moment of serenity when he sees the twin suns, as though it reminds him of like the past. Yes, cool. And he chooses to join the Force. Like it reminds him of Ben, because it was around the time he looked out at those twin suns. Was around the time he met Ben. So it reminded him, and I thought he joined the Force voluntarily, effectively. I mean, if you did that indefinitely, it would kill you, because it does take a toll. But he'd stopped before he died. It had killed him.
Well, I think there was an inevitability there for him.
Go on.
In terms of he knew what he was doing and that it was going to kill him.
Okay.
Could you just say to Kylo, it's like if he does kind of like the Obi-Wan line, so you strike me now, I'll be. Doesn't say like I'll be more powerful than you can ever imagine, but he says
I'll always be with you. I think he says.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not quite sure what that means. If he says, well, if we carry on with me fighting like here, eventually it's going to drain me and kill me, and frankly, I'll be with the Force and always around. I don't know.
The thing that excites me about the next film, though, is I like the idea of Force Ghost Luke not only, appearing to Rey, but to Kylo, even when Kylo's evil and mad and angry. I mean, and Luke just turns and goes, hello! And just almost taunting him a little bit. It's like, yeah, but you're still good there, really, aren't you? He's like, shut up!
I don't think we've seen the last of Mark Hamill in this, but we might have done. I don't know. I think all I'm saying is, though, you introduce new powers, and suddenly you've got beings that are there but not there. So again, a bit like you watch Iron Man, but you're aware it's just the suit, so there's no fucking danger. What's going to happen? The suit gets destroyed. I got mixed feelings about it, and I think I can understand why some fans didn't like it on the basis of, well, they've just pulled that out of their arse, haven't they? And yes, I know that there's a book from fucking 20 years ago where that does exist, but all but the hardcore, very, very hardcore of completist fans wouldn't know about that. So if you walked in with no spoilers and saw this, you would be a bit like, what? Wouldn't you? Surely.
Particularly if it ends with Luke dying anyway, you think, well, why wouldn't he just be there anyway? Might as well just be there in person.
I guess.
Well, how could he get there?
Well, they were saying
He
they
could
did
have
see
gone
the
with,
X-wing.
he could have gone with Rey in the first place, I guess. But yeah,
But obviously because of that,
the X-wing is there.
I always saw it with, Empire and Jedi, the way the powers are introduced in there, and there is kind of like a graduation. There's all sorts of stuff you see in Empire that wasn't in Star Wars. The Jedi that Luke does and Yoda does.
Yeah.
Luke's like levitating lightsabers and things like that. None of that was in Star Wars.
No, I understand that you can broaden these things out, but this is. I guess if we'd gone into the final battle of Empire, and all of a sudden a load of stuff got levitated and moved, and that had not even been established by that point of the film, we might be a bit like, where the fuck did they pull that out of their arse from?
I think some things work on screen, don't they? Some things work on screen, some things don't. Not the same way they would do, like, say, in a book or as an idea or in a comic or something.
Mm.
I'm
not sure. And I will say, again, a bit like Act 2, I think this act's a little bit baggy. Because I was getting close to, like, done with the film, obviously, and it was a rewatch anyway, and I'd done all the special features, and this stuff on Crate takes fucking ages. It is quite long-winded, but yeah, it's all right. It was worth it to see Carrie and Mark together. Whatever I think of this scene, it was worth it to see those two together.
But there you go. So
yeah,
that's pretty much.
That's pretty much it. They escape out the back area. There was
Ray's got the books.
Ray moved.
So the books aren't destroyed.
You do see when she opens the drawer, they've got it. And they're on the Millennium Falcon. The entire Resistance are on the Millennium Falcon. I mean, this is just not a big Resistance now. But Leia says we have all we need, which I think is a lovely, reassuring way she says it as well. And it's just nice to see her and Rey together. The other thing is, Poe introduces herself to Rey, and it didn't even occur to me they'd not met.
Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? They didn't actually. This is the first time we actually see them together throughout this new trilogy, and it's like, oh, okay.
It would be like getting to the end of the second film when you realise like Luke and Leia hadn't met or something.
Yeah, it'd be like, oh, so
like,
weird.
Really? But they're the three main characters. You imagine them always in the same shot or something. I think they will be in the next one. I certainly know in the Trevorrow version that the three of them were together for most of the film. So yeah, that's it. They basically escape, and we get the customary couple of minutes of music only, and we see the children from Canto Bight and one of the boys who was released. They're telling stories about Luke Skywalker, and then he goes outside, and I didn't pick it up first time. Second watch, he calls the broom to him with force sensitivity and looks up to the sky, and it's just
I spotted that on the first time I saw it, and I was like, oh, so exciting.
I don't think we'll see that kid again. I think the whole point is just purely that
there's more Jedi there.
There's more Jedi there, and it's a never-ending battle. And also, we see how the legends get passed down from generation to generation. They're telling stories to each other. It reminded me of C-3PO telling the
characters.
Jedi.
Yeah.
And again, it's back to Rose and it's for everyone. It's not just
it's cyclical, isn't it?
For people with super Jedi, people with all their powers and everything, and all the people that are born into bloodlines and all this. It's opening the Jedi and the Force up to what it was originally.
Yeah. I mean, there will be people who are sensitive, but he's only said a couple of scenes before, and I will not be the Last Jedi. Well, neither will Rey. And it's just broadened the universe out, and this story has messages of hope, which is where we started in 1977. Really, I know the retcon of the name was later, but it is about hope, and that's it. The Last Jedi, by far the most divisive Star Wars film reviewed.
Long last.
Final thoughts, folks.
It's amazing. I love it. I really do. I truly love it. I think it's just a brilliant film. I have so much fun with it. There's so much in there to unpack that I every time I watch it, I have such fun with it, and just thematically and emotionally, and I love it to pieces.
Becca?
No, I really enjoyed it. It's very difficult. Somebody got DM'd me on Twitter about ranking the Star Wars films, and I was like, place it too quite. It's kind of creeping up the rankings.
Yeah, you will have to one day, but it won't be this year.
Not right now. Maybe next year. Really enjoyed it. I mean, it's not perfect, but it is one of the best ones in the new trilogy. Love all the characters. Rose stands out definitely. I just screw all the haters basically.
Yeah, the stuff surrounding the film bothers me more than anything else. Cause it's just
I'd agree. Any of the trolls and anything that's happened to K-Tron, I'll just screw off. I don't have time for those sort of people.
Well, it's just it's just like, can we just talk about the film rather than like
exactly.
But anyway, look, the thing that there are loads of things in the film I actually like. I think certainly is one of the better looking Star Wars films. Certainly, it's certainly a fresh take on the series. There's some things I don't get on board with, but part of me is probably the reason why, if I appreciate any aspect of the film, it's just how. I know we use the word divisive, but it's divisive in me. I think of this. There's parts of this film where I think I like that, or I don't like that, but and that almost is like in a triumph in itself. So yeah, there you are. Last Jedi.
I mean, for me, it's everything I respond to. I think in execution, there's quite a lot wrong with it. But that's pacing. I think the Canto Bight thing. I think they've fallen in love with the set design, and actually it's not occurred to them there's more efficient ways to tell this story. This is quite a lot of busy work. I'm still not sure about the astral projection and stuff, in terms of whether I think it's too. Charlie's absolutely right. You can add new powers, and you should over time. Show us something new in the Force, great, but. It's when you show it and how you show it, and at a climactic point of a film, that can come off as a bit convenient. I'm not necessarily accusing that of this. I'm just this of that. I'm just a bit ambivalent, a bit on the fence about it. But all of the complaints about The Force Awakens were it's too safe, it's copying, it's a big studio coming in and just doing the template. Well, this is just given the complete lie to it. And all the complaints is actually you wanted Disney to do something new, but you actually wanted them to do the EU. You wanted them to do what was in your head. I have problems with some things about this film, and I don't have a lot of fun with it for a film that I found so funny on first watch. It's probably the funniest Star Wars film, which is something that doesn't get alluded to, but there's a lot of actually decent laughs in it and really good lines, but it's not an easy watch like The Force Awakens. It does feel quite long, and it's got the slog of a chase to it. It does it. I think back to that sort of Battlestar Galactica reference where they're getting just tired trying to stay ahead of the Cylons. I was getting almost tired trying to stay with the film, but the biggest thing you'll win with me for doing is taking some chances and trying something different, and as such this is probably the bravest film the Star Wars series has made, but certainly that the Disney entries, there's an inherent inbuilt safety to everything else they've done. A Solo film, yes, it's flopped, but it's such an obvious, let's tell a story about when he was younger, an origin story. Rogue One is actually a real clever concept, but it's kind of obvious as well. Everything they've done here is extremely brave. So as such, I probably don't love the film, but I have the deepest respect for it, and like, well done.
But you know what, Dave? I feel I'm always like under. I don't feel I know enough about this film.
I think there should be facts to be found amongst the stars. Star facts, if you would.
I've got 5 fun facts.
Cool.
5 glorious fun facts.
I've got some plumbed from the depths of the tinterwebs.
Okay.
Number 1, this is the highest billing for Carrie Fisher in the Star Wars film. Number 2, the hologram of Leia made by R2-D2 was originally recreated from original footage shot from A New Hope. I don't know if that's right or not. I think that sounds a bit spurious to me.
That's probably my favourite scene in the film, you know. I can't believe I completely forgot about it.
Oh yeah, I forgot about it at the end. Oh, bless him. Fun fact number 3, DJ's final line movie was improvised by Benicio del Toro. I'm going to backtrack here. I do like Del Toro generally, but in this film, not so much. That's just not his character. I just think he has a really mediocre performance when we know he's capable of better. So, never mind. I didn't enjoy him so much in this film. Anyway, fun fact number 4, it's the first film of Director Rian Johnson not to be scored by his cousin Nathan Johnson. And fun fact number 5, this is the 5th official Star Wars film for Warwick Davies, and he plays a different character. I was going to say each time, and most of the time, obviously not counting the Ewok movies. And that's it.
That's fun, folks.
Fun facts.
Yeah.
Social
They're facts,
media.
but they're not very fun, especially number 2.
Social media, folks.
You can find me on Twitter at MovieDrone.
Yeah, you can find me at Cinematronix on Twitter. You can also find this show and the back catalogue of all the Bond films at cinematronix.co.uk.
You can find me at The Pasty Kid 1976.
And Chris and Dave, you have also recorded a spring-summer special under the Cinematronix banner. Is it out yet?
It'll be out by the time. No, it'll be out by the time you're hearing this.
It will be, yeah. I was going to say tomorrow, but then this will be.
Yeah. At the point where this episode comes out, it came out 2 or 3 days ago. So yeah.
Coming to your ears.
Will you be putting it on the Do You Expect Us to Talk feed as well, Chris?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So yeah, you'll already have it if you're listening to this.
Oh, summer special coming your way.
I will stick that on YouTube as well.
You can follow us on Twitter at expectustalk. You can drop us an email, expectustalk@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook. If you type in Do You Expect Us to Talk? And you can also find us under the same name on YouTube, Do You Expect Us to Talk? I think that's it. Still not on Pinterest or Tinder or Grindr or Snapchat or...
Can we get on Tinder?
I'd rather not.
I'm glad you went with that one.
Not Grindr.
I don't really
Grindr,
want to go on Grindr.
There's nothing wrong with it, just neither of us swing that way.
That was a bit Seinfeld then, wasn't it? Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, nothing wrong with it at all.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what other platforms we can't be on. Pinterest.
Platform 9 3/4.
Yeah, that's it. So they're not magical.
Harry Potter coming in several years' time, folks.
Really?
Instead of Hermione.
I thought that was an Powers joke, but I won't do it.
Yeah, or not at all, yes. That's it then, isn't it? So, yeah, you've only got one Star Wars to go, Charlie. So just a quick word on you in this series, in case we forget to mention it next time. We're moving on to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which we need to sketch out offline. We haven't even done that yet. We don't know what commentaries we're doing or anything. But we will do a music episode at some point, so you'll join us for that.
Cool.
It'll probably fall into the new year now because we're going to run out of time this year. I really wanted to do this year for obvious reasons because it's the 50th, but we are covering Planet of the Apes. You'll join us for that. Down the road, there are other series you'll join us for. I know you've talked about the Terminator and Jaws and a couple of others, so there's other things you might join us for, but that's when we'll next see you. But the other thing we're going to do this year is the 40th anniversary of Superman the movie.
Cool.
December the 14th, I think it came out in this country. So we will be doing a commentary on that film. What with having lost Margot Kidder, we'll be doing a commentary in early December for release then, and Charlie will be joining us for that. In the meantime, he does have one more entry with us for Star Wars, which means, Becca,
Do you expect to talk or return with Solo, a Star Wars story?